The day Ethan Reed told his family he was gay over Thanksgiving dinner in their quiet Ohio home, his father stood up so fast the chair scraped like a scream across the hardwood and declared him the family shame, ordering him to leave forever. What no one expected was how that single moment would set Ethan on a path that would eventually force every one of them to confront their own prejudices and bow in respect. The turkey went cold on the table while his mother clutched her napkin and his younger brother stared at his plate as if the patterned china held the answers. Ethan's voice had shaken only once when he said the words, but after his father's roar of, "Not in my house," the room fell into a silence so thick it felt like winter air pressing against his chest. He packed one duffel bag that night under the hallway light, the same bulb that had watched him grow from skinned knees to high school graduation, and by morning he was on a Greyhound to Chicago with $200 and a heart that felt both shattered and strangely free. The bus ride lasted 14 hours, each mile peeling away layers of the life he had known. Cornfields blurred into strip malls, and finally into the steel and glass canyons of the city. Ethan stepped off at Union Station with a metallic taste of fear in his mouth, but he squared his shoulders the way his high school coach had taught him during football practice, back when nobody suspected the quarterback carried a different kind of secret. He found a cheap room in Logan Square above a taqueria, where the smell of cilantro and grilled onions drifted up through the floorboards at night. The first week he slept on a mattress that smelled of old cigarettes and spent his days walking the lakefront, letting the wind off Lake Michigan's slap sense into him. He applied to every entry-level tech job he could find online, lying only about his degree because the community college credits he had earned before dropping out still counted for something. By the third week, he landed an internship at a small startup called Pulse Innovations that designed apps for nonprofit organizations. The pay was barely enough for rent and ramen, but the office on the 12th floor of a converted warehouse had big windows and people who smiled without asking why his eyes sometimes looked red-rimmed. His boss, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, noticed his quiet determination and handed him extra projects on mobile UI. "You think like someone who's got something to prove," she told him one Friday. Ethan only nodded, because proving something was exactly what he was doing every single day he didn't call home. He met Marcus on a rainy Tuesday evening at a support group in a church basement 2 blocks from the L train. The room smelled of burnt coffee and damp coats. Marcus was 29, a graphic designer with warm brown eyes and a laugh that made the circle of folding chairs feel less like a confession booth and more like a living room. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he managed only 3 sentences before his throat closed. Marcus waited until the meeting ended, then offered him an umbrella and a ride home on the back of his Vespa. That ride through puddles and neon reflections became the first night Ethan laughed again since leaving Ohio. They talked until 3 in the morning on Ethan's tiny balcony, sharing stories of small-town secrets and big city hopes. Marcus didn't push, didn't judge. He simply listened and then said, "You're not the shame they called you. You're the beginning of something better." Those words lodged in Ethan's chest like a promise. The months that followed were a blur of late-night coding sessions, weekend farmers markets with Marcus, and the slow, terrifying process of learning to like himself in the mirror again. Ethan started therapy through the company's employee assistance program, sitting in a soft gray chair every Wednesday and unpacking years of Sunday school guilt and locker room fear. He learned to name the panic that still woke him at 2 a.m., wondering if his father had been right. Marcus never rushed the physical side. Instead, they built something stronger first: trust, inside jokes, the habit of texting each other good morning memes. When winter arrived with its lake-effect snow, Marcus brought Ethan a scarf the color of the Chicago River and said, "You're home now, wherever we are." Ethan believed him, even on the nights when homesickness hit like a freight train. Back in Ohio, his mother left 3 voicemails that he never returned. His father's silence was louder than any shout. Ethan told himself the distance was protection, but some evenings he sat on the fire escape staring at the city lights and wondered whether protection was just another word for running away. Then one morning Carla promoted him to junior developer with a small raise and the words, "You earned this, kid. Keep surprising us." That night Marcus cooked pasta, and they danced in the tiny kitchen to an old song on the radio. And for the first time, Ethan felt the future stretching out in front of him instead of the past dragging behind. He still had no idea how far that future would take him or how loudly it would echo all the way back to the dinner table he had been banished from. But he was beginning to believe he might be strong enough to find out. Spring brought longer days and the first real test of Ethan's new life. Pulse Innovations landed a major grant to build an app connecting LGBTQ plus youth with mentors, and suddenly Ethan's personal story became professional fuel. He worked 18-hour days designing the user interface, pouring every ounce of his own pain into making the experience gentle and affirming. Marcus teased him gently about the dark circles under his eyes, but showed up every evening with takeout and quiet encouragement. Their relationship deepened in small, steady ways. Sunday morning runs along the lake, arguments over the best pizza place that always ended in laughter, and the first time Marcus stayed the whole night, his steady breathing the only lullaby Ethan needed. Yet doubt still crept in during quiet moments. One afternoon, Ethan received a text from his younger brother, Tyler. "Mom misses you. Dad won't say it, but the house feels empty." Ethan stared at the screen for 20 minutes before deleting the message. He told Marcus later that night, while they sat on the roof, watching the sunset paint the skyline orange. "I'm scared that if I go back, they'll just remind me why I left." Marcus took his hand and said, "Then don't go back until you're ready to remind them why you're worth staying for." The word stayed with Ethan like a compass. At work, a new colleague named Derek joined the team. Derek was charming, ambitious, and quick with compliments. He started lingering at Ethan's desk, asking questions that felt more personal than professional. Ethan brushed it off at first, focused on the deadline, but Marcus noticed the extra late nights and the way Ethan's answers grew shorter when Derek's name came up. Their first real fight happened on a humid July evening. "I'm not jealous," Marcus said, voice tight, "but I'm not blind either. You're letting him get too close because part of you still believes you don't deserve someone who chooses you without an agenda." Ethan slammed the refrigerator door harder than necessary. "That's not fair. I'm just trying to do my job." The argument ended with both of them on opposite sides of the bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence heavier than any shout his father had ever delivered. The next morning, Ethan apologized over coffee, admitting Marcus was right about the lingering fear. They spent the weekend rebuilding, driving out to Starved Rock for a hike and talking about the future they wanted, maybe a bigger apartment, maybe one day adopting a dog. Ethan realized that love wasn't just romance. It was choosing to stay and work through the hard parts. By Monday, he set clear boundaries with Derek, and the tension at the office eased. The app launched successfully, earning Pulse Innovations industry recognition and Ethan a bonus that allowed him to pay off his last credit card debt from a move. For the first time, he felt financially stable, emotionally steadier, and romantically certain. Summer turned to fall, and Ethan started mentoring a 17-year-old named Jamie through the very app he had helped build. Jamie's story mirrored his own. Conservative parents, fear of coming out, running away to the city with nothing but hope. Helping Jamie forced Ethan to confront how far he had come and how much further he still wanted to go. He took Jamie to his first Pride parade, watching the young man's eyes widen at the sea of colors and acceptance. That night, Marcus met them for fireworks over the lake, and as the sky exploded in gold and red, Ethan felt a quiet pride settle in his chest. He was no longer just surviving. He was becoming the man he had always needed when he was Jamie's age. Yet the past refused to stay buried. His mother's fourth voicemail arrived on a crisp October morning. "Your father had a heart scare last week. He's home now, but he won't talk about it. I'm not asking you to come back, Ethan. I'm just telling you he's not as strong as he pretends." Ethan listened to the message 3 times in the stairwell at work, knees weak. Marcus found him there and simply held him while he cried for the first time in months. That evening they sat on the couch and made a list of what Ethan needed before he could even consider returning home. Boundaries, an apology, proof that he wouldn't be asked to shrink himself again. Writing the list felt like drawing a map to a country he wasn't sure still existed. But for the first time, the idea of going back didn't feel like defeat. It felt like the next necessary step in a journey that had started with a slammed chair and an exile he had turned into his greatest strength. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing Chicago in snow that muffled the city's usual roar. Pulse Innovations had grown fast after the app's success, and Ethan was promoted to lead developer with his own small team. The responsibility both thrilled and terrified him. He spent long hours mentoring juniors, many of them queer kids fresh out of college who reminded him of his younger self. Marcus landed a freelance contract designing branding for a national LGBTQ plus nonprofit, and their evenings became collaborative brainstorming sessions fueled by too much coffee and quiet pride in each other's accomplishments. Their relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm, shared groceries, inside jokes, the kind of love that felt like home rather than fireworks. Yet success brought new pressures. Derek had left the company after a performance review, but not before spreading quiet rumors that Ethan had been promoted because of special favors. The whispers reached Carla, who shut them down immediately, but the damage to Ethan's confidence lingered. He found himself working twice as hard to prove the whispers wrong, staying late until his eyes burned. Marcus noticed and gently confronted him one snowy Friday night. "You're punishing yourself for other people's ignorance again," he said, voice soft but firm. They talked until dawn, and Ethan admitted the old shame still lived in the corners of his mind, waiting for any excuse to surface. Marcus suggested they take a weekend away in Michigan, just the two of them, to reset. The cabin they rented had a fireplace and no cell service, and for 48 hours the only decisions they made were whether to hike or stay in bed reading. Ethan returned to Chicago lighter, more centered, and more certain that his worth wasn't measured by other people's opinions. The real test came in February, when Pulse received an invitation to present at a national tech conference in New York. Ethan was chosen to lead the panel on inclusive design. The night before his flight, he received another call from his mother. This time she didn't leave a voicemail. She stayed on the line until he picked up. Her voice cracked when she said, "Tyler told us about the app you built. Your father saw the news article online. He didn't say anything, but he saved the link." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'm not coming home, Mom." "Not yet." She sighed, the sound of years of unspoken regret. "I know. Just be careful in New York." The call ended without the usual "I love you," but the fact that she had called at all felt like the first crack in a wall Ethan had assumed was permanent. New York was electric. The conference center buzzed with thousands of developers, and Ethan's presentation received a standing ovation. A venture capitalist approached him afterward, offering seed funding for an independent startup focused on mental health tools for queer youth. Ethan spent the entire flight home drafting business plans on his laptop, heart racing with possibility. When he told Marcus the news over takeout Thai food, Marcus's grin was brighter than the city lights outside their window. "This is it," Marcus said. "Your life-changing choice." They celebrated quietly, making love for the first time in weeks with a tenderness that carried the weight of everything they had survived together. The startup, named Haven, took off faster than Ethan had dared dream. Within 6 months, he had a small office in the West Loop, 3 employees, and his first paying clients. The app combined therapy matching with community forums and crisis resources, all designed with the input of the very youth it served. Media outlets started calling. Ethan gave his first interview to a local LGBTQ plus magazine, speaking openly about his journey from Ohio exile to Chicago entrepreneur. The article went viral, and suddenly his phone buzzed with messages from old high school classmates who had never known his truth. Most were supportive. A few were silent. None came from his father. Spring brought the first major crisis. Haven's funding round hit a snag when a conservative investor pulled out after learning the mission. Ethan spent 3 sleepless nights rewriting pitches and reaching out to new networks. Marcus stayed up with him, offering design revisions and unwavering belief. When a new round closed successfully, larger than the first, Ethan felt something shift inside him. He was no longer proving anything to his father. He was building something that mattered to the world he now claimed as his own. Yet late one night, staring at the Chicago skyline from his office window, he realized the final piece still missing was the conversation he had been avoiding for 2 years. The thought no longer terrified him. It simply felt inevitable. Summer heat wrapped Chicago like a blanket when the call finally came. Ethan was in the middle of a strategy meeting when his phone lit up with his mother's number. He stepped outside onto the fire escape, heart hammering. "It's your father," she said without preamble. "The family hardware store is failing. Suppliers are pulling out, debts are mounting, and the bank won't extend the loan. He won't ask for help, but I'm asking. Not for money, for advice. You always understood numbers better than any of us." Ethan stared at the traffic below, the city moving on while his childhood home teetered on collapse. He heard his father's voice in his head calling him shame. Yet another voice, his own, answered that shame no longer defined him. "I'll come," he said quietly, "but on my terms. Marcus comes with me. No hiding. No conditions." His mother's pause lasted only a second. "Thank you, Ethan. We'll be here." The drive to Ohio took 6 hours. Marcus drove the first half, letting Ethan sit in silence and watch the familiar cornfields roll by. They arrived at dusk. The house looked smaller than Ethan remembered, paint peeling on the shutters his father had once been so proud of. His mother opened the door before they reached the porch, eyes glistening. Tyler stood behind her, taller now, 19, and awkward in his attempt at a hug. His father remained in the living room, seated in the same recliner, face pale but jaw set. The tension was thick enough to taste. Ethan introduced Marcus simply. "This is my partner." His father's eyes flicked once, then returned to the television. No outburst, no welcome, just silence. Over the next 3 days, Ethan pored over the store's books at the kitchen table, while Marcus helped his mother in the garden, building quiet bridges through small acts of kindness. The numbers were worse than expected. Decades of resisting online sales and community shifts had left the business brittle. Ethan worked late into the nights, sketching a digital transformation plan, an e-commerce site, targeted social media campaigns, partnerships with local contractors. He presented the plan on the 4th evening, voice steady. "This can save the store, but it requires change. And it requires accepting that the person offering the solution is the same son you once threw out." His father stared at the printed spreadsheets for a long minute, then stood and walked out to the garage without a word. Marcus found Ethan on the back porch later, staring at the stars. "He'll come around," Marcus said, wrapping arms around him from behind. Ethan leaned back. "I don't need him to love me the way I wanted anymore. I just need him to respect the man I became without him." The next morning, his father appeared at breakfast for the first time since their arrival. He set a mug of coffee in front of Ethan, black, exactly how Ethan liked it, and said gruffly, "Show me the website mock-ups again." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even close. But it was the first time in 3 years his father had looked him in the eye without anger. The work intensified. Ethan and Marcus extended their stay, turning the spare bedroom into a makeshift office. Tyler joined them, eager to learn coding basics and slowly opening up about his own questions about identity and masculinity. Late-night conversations around the kitchen table revealed cracks in the family armor. His mother's quiet depression after Ethan left, Tyler's fear of disappointing their father, the way the hardware store had become the only identity his dad still clung to. Ethan listened without judgment, offering the same patience Marcus had once shown him. Slowly, the house began to feel less like a battlefield and more like a place where healing might be possible. One humid afternoon, his father found Ethan alone in the garage, sorting old inventory. The older man cleared his throat twice before speaking. "I was wrong to say what I said that night. Didn't know how to be scared for you and still be your father at the same time." Ethan kept his hands busy with a box of nails, afraid any sudden movement would shatter the moment. "I'm not asking you to understand everything," he replied. "Just stop pretending I'm the enemy." His father nodded once, the closest thing to agreement Ethan had ever received. They worked side by side in silence after that, the clink of tools the only conversation needed. Marcus later told Ethan it was the loudest apology he had ever witnessed. The grand reopening of Reed Hardware happened on a perfect Saturday in late August. Ethan's digital overhaul had transformed the dusty storefront into a modern community hub with an online ordering system that shipped same day to 3 counties. Local news covered the event, and the parking lot filled with trucks and families. Ethan stood at the ribbon cutting beside his father, Marcus on his other side, both men wearing matching Reed Hardware polo shirts that Marcus had designed with subtle rainbow stitching only visible up close. When the mayor asked Ethan to say a few words, he kept it short. This store was built on hard work and family. Today it stands for something bigger, second chances and open doors. The applause was genuine. His father's shoulders straightened a fraction, the first visible sign of pride Ethan had seen in years. Yet not every shadow lifted easily. A local pastor who had once preached against that lifestyle showed up to protest outside with 3 signs. Ethan's father walked out, faced the man he had known for 30 years, and said simply, "My son saved this business. You got a problem with that? You take it up with me." The protest dissolved within minutes. Ethan watched from the window, chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Later that night, around the family dinner table, turkey again, but this time no slammed chairs, his mother raised a glass. To Ethan, who showed us all what real strength looks like. Even his father lifted his glass, eyes meeting Ethan's for a long, meaningful second. The following week brought the true test of their fragile truce. A national hardware chain offered to buy Reed Hardware for more money than the family had ever seen. The offer included a clause requiring the new owners to keep the name but modernize aggressively. Code for replacing Ethan's community-focused vision with corporate efficiency. Ethan spent the evening presenting data. Keeping the store independent would preserve jobs, support local suppliers, and maintain the heart of the business. His father listened, then asked questions that showed he had actually read every report Ethan had prepared. At the end he said, "We turn it down. This store belongs to the family. All of it." The word all carried weight, and everyone at the table heard it. Marcus and Ethan drove back to Chicago the next morning with a new understanding. The trip had not erased the past, but it had rewritten the future. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his father 2 hours into the drive. "Safe trip. Call when you get home." Simple words, but they landed like a lifeline. Back in their apartment, Ethan stood on the balcony watching the sunrise paint the skyline and realized he had done more than save a family business. He had saved a piece of himself he hadn't known was still missing. The months that followed were a whirlwind of expansion for both Haven and Reed Hardware. Ethan flew home every other weekend, sometimes with Marcus, sometimes alone, helping implement new inventory software and watching his father slowly learn to use a tablet. Tyler started college with Ethan's encouragement, majoring in business and texting daily questions. His mother joined a book club and began speaking openly about supporting LGBTQ+ causes in town. The changes were gradual, sometimes awkward, but undeniably real. Ethan no longer braced for rejection every time the phone rang. Instead, he answered with quiet confidence. One crisp November evening, almost exactly 3 years after that fateful Thanksgiving, Ethan and Marcus hosted a small dinner in Chicago for the whole Reed family. The table was crowded with laughter, stories, and the kind of easy teasing that only comes with healed wounds. His father raised a glass again, this time looking directly at Marcus. "Thank you for loving my son when I didn't know how." Marcus simply nodded, eyes shining. Later, on the rooftop under the same stars that had witnessed their first real conversation, Marcus slipped an arm around Ethan's waist and whispered, "You did it. You made them see you." Ethan leaned into the embrace, the city lights below mirroring the peace he finally felt inside. The following spring, Haven expanded into 3 new cities, and Reed Hardware opened a second location in the next county over. Ethan's life had become a careful balance of board meetings, weekend visits home, and quiet evenings with Marcus planning a future that included marriage and maybe fostering a teenager who needed the kind of second chance Ethan had once received. The family group chat, started by Tyler as a joke, now filled daily with memes, store updates, and photos of Sunday dinners. Ethan sometimes joined via video. His father had taken to sending awkward but sincere articles about LGBTQ+ rights, each one a small bridge across the years of silence. One warm June afternoon, Ethan stood on the same Chicago rooftop where he and Marcus had first talked about forever. This time his entire family was there, dressed for a celebration. Marcus knelt in front of him with a simple platinum band, asking the question they had both known the answer to for years. When Ethan said yes, the rooftop erupted in cheers, his mother's tears, Tyler's whoop, and even his father's gruff clap on the back. The moment felt like the final piece of a puzzle Ethan had been assembling since the night he walked out of that Ohio house with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. He had not only survived, he had thrived, and in doing so had shown everyone what love, courage, and authenticity could build. Later that evening, after the family had gone back to their hotel and Marcus was asleep beside him, Ethan stepped onto the balcony one last time. The city hummed below, alive and indifferent, yet somehow kinder now. He thought about the boy who had once been called shame and the man who had turned that label into legacy. The journey had not been clean or easy. There were still nights when old fears whispered, but every scar had become a story worth telling. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Proud of you, son. Always should have said it sooner." Ethan smiled into the darkness, typed a simple thank you, and hit send. True or false? Family love should never have to be earned through success and sacrifice. Yet sometimes the hardest journeys are the ones that finally teach us its true worth.